Thanks, everybody, for coming. As she said, I direct the Colorado Center for the Book at Colorado Humanities. I'm so glad to see everyone here. And thank you to the Book Bar for providing us with this great venue again for the 31st Annual Colorado Book Awards Finalist Reading Series. And thanks to our partners. It's really called Unite for Literacy, and they're working hard to help young people get prepared for school. And the Colorado Sun, which does weekly excerpts of Colorado authors, is it Fridays or Sundays, every week in the Colorado Sun. Before we get to the readings, I want to introduce you to our new Colorado Center for the Book Programs Coordinator, Mary Hickey, and Marketing Coordinator, Betsy Lopez, who will be taking pictures and helping out. So tonight, I'm pleased to introduce you to 5 talented writers whose books have been named by Colorado Book Awards selectors as the finalist in history, historical fiction, and mystery categories. Now, the finalists from the historical fiction category will start with, and then followed by finalists in the mystery category, and we'll move quickly, but I'll stop trying to read so quickly. And keep everyone to their time limits. And Mary will raise a finger to indicate finalists, so have a watch for her when you have 1 minute left in your reading. We're not as tight tonight, just so everybody knows, because we don't have so many readers, but we'll still want to keep to those limits. Copies of all the finalist books are available for purchase, except for Thomas Hall's. And you need to make special arrangements because he couldn't be here and bring books tonight if you want to purchase those. And he's going to appear maybe at a later reading, and you could meet him then. Let's see, we have sprung for snacks, and please, there are little plates, and things are on sticks, and there are forks, and it all seems very pandemic appropriate up here, so don't be afraid to come up and get some snacks and enjoy other things from the Book Bar. There'll be a Q&A with every author after he or she reads, and then we'll invite all the authors up at the end for a Q&A when you have the whole brain trust up at the end. Our first reader in historical fiction is Mario Acevedo, who will read from his book Luther, Wyoming, that he co-wrote with Tomas Alamilla, who could not be here tonight. Tomas Alamilla is a Mexican entrepreneur with a lifelong love of stories featuring Western adventure, tough cowboys, and strong women. And Tomas lives in Garden City. Mario Acevedo is an award-winning editor, a best-selling author of fantasy, action, and historical novels, including short stories. And he was the editor of an anthology that won the Colorado Book Award in 2017. And he lives in Denver. Mario.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Josephine, for that wonderful introduction. First of all, I need to, well, she's the first one I thanked. So, okay, the second one I'm going to thank would be Tiffany Schofield, who's the editor at 5 Star Press, who's the one who acquired the novel. And so I'm really grateful for her. She's in Maine, far away, okay, but hopefully she'll hear this. And also to Mary Hickey from the Colorado Book Award, and to the Book Bar. Everybody give a round of applause to the Book Bar because they've been very, very supportive of us writers, and I really appreciate that. And also to my co-author, Tomas Alamilla, and he's a very reclusive person. He does exist, but he's a very reclusive person, and he travels a lot between Garden City, which is outside of Greeley, and into Mexico. He wants to keep a low profile, all right? So my book is a Western, and I just kind of give you an idea what it is. It's Tomas Alamilla and Mario Acevedo have written a smart and imaginative novel. Who writes a dumb novel, right? Write a smart and imaginative novel of the Old West with villains that are villainous and good ones and good guys that are not so much. Saddle up for a fast-paced and memorable ride. So I'll just start with the first chapter because it's short and gives you an idea what the book's about. All right, chapter 1, April 1873. Adam Sanchez said, "Tess, please, we can find a way to make this work." Tess Buchanan stood on the threshold of her father's house and propped the door open against one shoulder. "Adam, we've gone over this. I can't see you anymore." She regarded Adam with doe eyes, huge and beautiful, and he wondered how he could have misread them. Until 2 days ago, he was certain she was as much in love with him as he was with her. He felt the moment backfire, and it left him reeling. A breeze lifted the aroma of lilacs off the Virginia landscape. Adam was dressed in his best clothes, which meant his least worn trousers, shirt, and coat, laundered or brushed clean. He worried the brim of his hat between his fingertips. Inside him, the stain of horror from the war, 11 years past, had just started to fade, and now he felt another stain color his heart, a stain of rejection. He wanted to ask why, but he knew. Tess was the only daughter of a federal judge. She had schooling. She was high society. At one time, she had been a debutante. Who was Adam? A Comanchero from the New Mexico territories, a Mexican Comanche half-breed. For the last 14 plus years, he had lived among these people on the East Coast, fought in their war, learned their language, read their books, taught himself to sound schooled, understood their ways, both the straight and the crooked, learned to cloak himself in their customs, and somehow fooled himself into thinking that because they needed him and praised him for his service, he was their equal. In fact, he wasn't. They didn't regard him much higher than any of the colored soldiers. Tess's father, Judge Gideon Buchanan, often reminded him of that. The first time Adam and the judge met, Adam had made sure to dress in a borrowed suit, which he decorated with his medal from the Grand Army of the Republic. But the judge pointed to the medal and dismissed Adam in a boozy slur. Why should I be impressed? You only did what was expected of you before stumbling in the direction of a fresh bottle. That was also a fact. But Adam didn't mention that he knew plenty of white men of the judge's station who hadn't done their duty, educated malingerers who waved the flag and boasted of the patriotism, yet shirked behind their privileges and moneyed connections. Despite her father, Tess's affection had been genuine. Once. Perhaps it still was. Adam shifted his weight. The porch creaked beneath him. Tess, he said weakly, and groped for something more to say, for a magic phrase that would make all that separated them disappear and have her tumble into his arms like she used to. She shook her head. Don't, please, that time has passed. She glanced downward, and the silence between them grew hard and bitter. Adam tried to swallow the lump in his throat. What a dolt he had been to pretend he could build a future with a woman like her. Tess, Judge Buchanan called from inside the house. The water's a-boiling. I'd like my coffee now. She looked over her shoulder and then at Adam. Her face softened with resignation, like she was trapped with no way to escape her obligations. I have to go. She braced one arm against the door jamb and started to turn from him. Take care of yourself. They locked eyes one last time, and when she yanked her gaze away, it was as if the motion ripped his heart. The door closed. Adam stared at it in disbelief. He felt small, childish, wasting his time longing for something he was never meant to have. He backed away, turned around, and stumbled down the porch steps. His horse waited in the shade of a cottonwood. The one woman among the dozens he had wooed, the one he had fallen for, the one he would change for, was the one who had spurned him. The irony burned, and it would be a long time before that ache healed, if ever. Many times in his youth he had told himself this kind of foolish heartbreak wouldn't happen to him, and yet here he was. He reached his horse. From one of the saddlebags, he retrieved his gun belt and cinched it around his waist. He found his spurs and buckled them in place. Last, he untied the bay mare's reins and hoisted himself onto the saddle. He paused and gave the judge's house one final appraisal. A fleeting notion entertained him that Bess would come running, but that hope quickly faded. In the distance, a train whistle blew, and its echoing wail nudged Adam to get moving. He snapped the reins and guided the horse west. So there you go. So I'll just say, Tess will be back. Okay. So thank you very much.
Do you have any questions?
Any questions of me? I have questions of you. Yeah, yes. Pardon me. Yeah.
Is this a historical novel? Is it based on something that actually happened?
You know, I write fiction, so I'm a professional liar. Okay, so no, but I research. There is no place called Luther, Wyoming, but I did an awful lot of research. You know, and like things like the stagecoach and all the details that came about, and so that was a lot of fun. I tried to make it as authentic as I possibly could. Any other questions? No. Well, thank you very much.
E.G. Levy. I am so excited. E.J. Levy, but I got the Levy right. I did. I worked on the Levy part. Okay. She'll read from her book, The Cave Doctor. E.J.'s fiction and essays have appeared in the Paris Review, Best American Essays, the New York Times, Orion, Salon, Rumpus, Salmagunde, Salmagunde Kenyon Review, The Nation, and won a Pushcart Prize. The Cape Doctor was a New York Times Book Review Editor's Choice and a Barnes & Noble Best Book of Summer. Foreign editions are forthcoming in French, Spanish, and Italian. That's so exciting. Are you going to get to go over there and do readings? That is just amazing. Congratulations. And she's an associate professor in Colorado State University's Creative Writing MFA program and lives in Fort Collins. EJ, thank you. Now watch your step.
Thank you. This is such a pleasure. And I'm actually going to read my little introduction since I appear to forget what my book is about when I stand in front of a crowd. So I just want to thank Book Bar and the Colorado Humanities and the Center for the Book and Mary Hickey and Rhonda Livingston and Josephine and all of you for being here, for supporting readers and writers in Colorado. It's an honor to be reading tonight with fellow finalists. I'm going to read an excerpt from my debut novel, The Cape Doctor, that was published by Little Brown last June. The novel is inspired by the life, can you hear me? Yeah? Okay. Inspired by the life of a brilliant, irascible 19th century Irish army surgeon, Dr. James Miranda Barry, who practiced medicine in the British colonies in the first half of the 19th century. Dr. Barry performed the first successful cesarean recorded in Africa, improved medicine for the socially marginalized, was caught in a sodomy scandal with, was caught in a sodomy scandal with the aristocratic governor of the Cape Colony in 1824, but nevertheless rose to the rank of Inspector General, the equivalent of a brigadier general. Only to be discovered after death in 1865 to have been a quote-unquote perfect female who'd carried a child. So we now know that that perfect female was Margaret Ann Bulkley, born in Cork, Ireland around 1790, who took the identity of James Barry in order to enter medical school at Edinburgh University in 1809. 40 years before the first known woman, Elizabeth Blackwell, would be granted a medical degree in the US in 1849, and more than 50 years before a woman would be licensed to practice medicine in Great Britain, that being, of course, Elizabeth Garrett Anderson, the year that Barry died. Because my novel is fiction, I've changed Dr. James Barry's name to Jonathan Perry, Dr. Jonathan Perry. My novel focuses on 20 years of the doctor's life, from Margaret's arrival as a girl in London, seeking her uncle's help after family bankruptcy, to her transformation into Jonathan in order to enter medical school in 1809, to their posting to the Cape Colony in South Africa in 1816, where they would remain for a dozen years. So my book focuses on this crucial period of their education in medicine, in masculinity, and in love. I'm just going to read the first page and a half from the first chapter, and I hope it'll whet your appetite for more. Chapter 1. Fortunate son. She died so I might live, Margaret. I owe her my life. Not a day goes by when I don't think of it, of her. Sorry, this is strange. It sounds like a lot of reverb. Can I just step away from the mic? Is that?
It's just a feedback. We need to turn the mic.
I'm so sorry. Great. Oh, thanks. That's brilliant. That's perfect. Okay. So, chapter 1, Fortunate Son. She died so I might live, Margaret. I owe her my life. Not a day goes by when I don't think of it, of her, as not a day goes by when I don't think of him. She died so I might live. But isn't that the lot of women, to sacrifice, as our Lord was said to have done? Few speak of Mary's sacrifice, of course. That, we are to assume, was unexceptional. To martyr oneself for others is the expected lot of mothers and daughters. It's rarer in sons, except in war. So naturally, given the choice, I chose to be a son. Given the choice, who wouldn't? There are so many things we do not know until it is too late, among them that it's never too late. The American ambassador, Franklin, said it best, quote, "I want to live so I might see how it turns out," unquote. We do. I can see that from where I am now, wherever that is, in this almost afterlife of imagination or fact, who can say for sure which it is? I can see that my life will be a scandal and an inspiration. Charles Dickens will write of me, and Twain, even Havelock Ellis. I will be a riddle generations will try to answer, a riddle I'm trying to answer now. When I was a boy, I was told that when I began a story, to begin at the beginning and continue to the end, so I shall. The question is, of course, where it all began. Where does any story start? Where did mine? The ending, alas, is always all too clear. But to understand my beginning, you must understand her end, Margaret's. Although it's been a long time since I saw her, more than a lifetime or several, I recall her vividly, though now she's more like an echo, an idea I once had, a dream. Yet for years when I looked in the mirror, I saw her, looking back with my blue eyes. And somewhere in a parish church in Cork, there's a baptism recorded for the second child of Mary Ann and Jeremiah Brackley, who was christened one early April, our parents' eldest daughter, Margaret Brackley, an ungainly name for an unpromising start. No one who'd ever seen Margaret Brackley in her infancy would have supposed her to be born a heroine, or so Jane Austen might have written of her had she been informed of Margaret's entrance into the world in 1795 or so. Her situation in life, her mother and father, her own person and disposition were all equally against her. Her father was a prosperous greengrocer in Cork, without being neglected or poor, and a very respectable man, though his name was Jeremiah, and he'd never been handsome. His eldest daughter, Margaret, had a thin, awkward figure, sallow skin, unruly red blonde hair, and diminutive features, and not less unpropitious for heroism, seemed her mind. She greatly preferred dogs to dolls. She had no taste for needlepoint, drawing, or dances. There was nothing in the appearance of Margaret, in short, that would have suggested her as a likely heroine of this or any story. And she had what was considered to be, in the late 18th century, as in too many centuries before and since, that most appalling defect at birth. She was born a girl. So I'll end there. And I should say, in case any of you are Austen fans, that you might have noticed that long second passage is a very close imitation of the first paragraph from Austen's first novel, Northanger Abbey. And so it's a kind of, the language is antique, but also, I hope, a conversation with these narratives of female education and other novels. So are there any questions? I'm happy to answer them.
Where did you hear about her from?
My partner was in aerospace working with NASA. They have an annual conference. When I was teaching in DC, it was in Cape Town, so I accompanied him to Cape Town and read 2 lines in a guidebook about this irascible, dandy, dualist, so brilliant doctor that even Napoleon himself called for Barry from his deathbed, who was discovered, who was caught in a sodomy scandal and then discovered after death to have been a perfect female who'd carried a child. And I was just haunted. I really felt I got the voice, the first line was in my head on the plane, and as I toured around Cape Town, she died so I might live. And I took notes, kind of speculating what it would be, how it must have seemed to Dr. Barry. And weirdly, when I got home to the States, I got one of the few biographies by Rachel Holmes from about 2000. And a lot of my hunches proved to be right. And so then I felt kind of empowered to write this, even though I'd not written a novel before. So thanks for asking. It's a good question. I hope that it will bring attention to this amazing figure. Please. Dr. Barry kept a very rich archive that's in Kew, London. Some letters are in Connecticut. The name James Barry was taken from their uncle, who was a famous historical painter in London. And so their papers are part of a Yale archive in Connecticut. So that there are different places we can find them. But two excellent biographies. One by Rachel Holmes, came out in 2000, roughly. Another came out in 2016 when I'd already finished writing my book, but it was super helpful. It's a terrific book called Dr. James Barry, A Woman Ahead of Her Time. So even as I disagree with some of their conclusions, it's the best research. They did the best archival work. But it wasn't really until 2000 that it was known that this was Margaret M. Bulkley, that for a century and a half, we didn't know her name. So thank you. It's a good question. Yeah. Are there any others? Thank you so much.
Thanks, EJ. There's such a porous boundary, isn't there, between history and fiction? I know when I've tried to write history, it's the same process I imagine. I'm not able to fictionalize much myself, but that you do, because I was writing about Sacagawea's time and how there are no written records. I need to imagine that and write it as I think you do with your narratives. So I learned so much from fiction about historical times, too. Thank you. So much to talk about there, but later. Okay, so the third finalist in the historical fiction category, Thomas Hall, could not be here tonight. His book is titled Chloe's Mystery. What do you think? Okay. In the midst of the Great Depression, Chloe Boisvert arrives in rural Louisiana from New Orleans by way of Paris, France, to live with her aunt and estranged sister. She develops a friendship with PJ, a runaway, who's just arrived in town. Just giving you an idea of the setting and the story. It's Jim Crow. Chloe struggles under Jim Crow, and PJ finds a life as a pilot with the Flying Tigers, American mercenaries fighting for China prior to the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. Who knew? I did not know about any of that. Anyway, more learning from historical fiction there. So I think Mr. Hall will join a later reading when he can. So next, we'll hear from finalists in the mystery category. Jodi Bowersox will read from her book, Red Rabbit on the Run. Jodi has been an actress, seamstress, designer, business owner, homeschool teacher, choir director, and artist. Her romance novels span genres from faith fiction to suspense to time travel to sci-fi, and I would say that's an interesting range, with small town, big city, and interplanetary settings. She lives in Colorado Springs. Jodi?
Thank you for having me here, and thank you for all being here and listening. Are the enemies real or imagined? Tiffany Morrow has just been through hell. After being kidnapped and sold to a brothel in the Amazon, she comes out of a very bad drug-induced trip to find herself in the custody of a couple that claims to be taking her home to Denver. But she can't go home until she can prove that embezzling is going on in her mother's multi-million-dollar corporation. And how does she know that these new people are really acting in her best interests? The last person she trusted sold her into prostitution. She was used to seeing the dragons, but schizophrenia is a complication she just doesn't have time for when people are chasing her everywhere she goes. In this scene, she has just given her rescuers the slip and jumped on a bus to give herself time to figure out her next move. Sorry. Tiffany closed her eyes against the onslaught of thoughts swirling like a tornado in her brain as her hand slid over a strand of hair. The feel of it grounded her, even though she recognized that the gesture she couldn't seem to stop meant she wasn't as well as she was before. She had thought she only imagined the demon horse with glowing red eyes at the airport, since it looked like so many of the demon creatures that had haunted her in the past. But there was no mistaking the mountain view she had seen out of the window this morning. She was really and truly in Denver. She was home. The nightmare of the jungle was over. She had vague memories of the in-between, men and women in white, being tied down, the bearded man and the blonde woman who had brought her here. She'd been tripping hard for days, so most of that was like a fever dream that had frightened even her, and she wasn't frightened by much anymore. She still didn't feel normal. The noise of the bus was clawing into her head, but she was much improved over before. She really didn't know how much time had passed since she had been carried out of that vile cabin in the Amazon. She did remember that, waking for a moment or two in the arms of someone strong, a red dragon. Whispered words she couldn't recall, words that had struck her as kind. So why did you run from them? God, you do the stupidest things. The voices that had nearly been eliminated before she had awakened in a Brazilian hell had been her almost constant companion without the meds whose job it was to hush them to a whisper. She knew it would do no good to answer the voices. They never listened to her. But she did know why she was running from those who had helped her. Aaron McCain had spoken with kind and beautiful words. Justin Miranda had too. Kind words were often a trap. Who's to say that these new two weren't taking her from one hell to another? There was another reason she had to get away. They were going to take her home, and even though a few things were still mixed up in her mind, she knew that home was not somewhere she wanted to go. She loved her parents, but no one there believed her about what she discovered before she was kidnapped. No one there took her seriously. They just gave her a pitying smile and asked her if she was taking her meds. They always asked if she was taking her goddamn meds like she was a child. Yes, she had issues, but she wasn't a child. And even though the embezzling scheme she'd stumbled upon at her family's business sounded paranoid, she knew she wasn't being paranoid. It was real. The numbers proved it, and she'd kept them through it all. I know what you've been doing. She heard her own words echoing in her head, words she'd spoken to Chase Owens. How long had it been? She didn't even really know. She put hands to her ears as the laughter rang through her brain like a great clanging gong, and she strove to focus on remember the details of that night. She might have to testify about their conversation. Tiff, this is the second time you've been caught messing around with company computers. You have to stop. She hadn't bothered answering him. She had needed just a few more seconds for the files to download on her memory stick. What do you think you're doing anyway? She had looked up then. She remembered how the security lighting had given him an eerie glow, although his face had been mostly in shadow. I'm gathering evidence, she had told him. The laughter started in her head again. Blowing out of breath, she recited the numbers and fingered her hair until the noise eased. Tiffany knew Owens was dangerous, even if her parents couldn't see it, and she was determined to show everyone who and what he was. Forcing her hands to her lap and a smile to her lips, she turned to the guy across the aisle engrossed in his phone and asked if she could borrow it for just a minute or two. questions? No? Okay. Yes? Okay. So obviously we have a gal who has some mental issues. And like it says, she was in a brothel. She was kidnapped, sent to a brothel, and she's been rescued. But she doesn't want to go home because she has these issues that she thinks she needs to solve first. So, so that's where the Red Rabbit on the Run comes from. She is the Red Rabbit. Her track coach had given her that name because she has red hair, long red hair, and she can run like a wild hare. So she, at this point, she doesn't know who she can trust. She's been off her meds, and so she's on the run. And the private eye and a woman who had gone undercover to rescue her, then they thought it was going to be an easy job taking this little girl home and getting paid, but no, she's given them the slip, so now they have to go after her. And then you do find out that, yes, there are people after her, and they don't know why and who they are. And so that's kind of the story of trying to figure out the whole scheme going on there. But anything else? I did obviously have to do a lot of research on schizophrenia. I don't have particular personal with that, but I did a lot of research and read a lot of firsthand accounts of what it feels like to be schizophrenic, what it's like for those who the meds help them lead almost a normal life, for those people that the meds never really do help enough, that they always still have some of the voices. And then I had a doctor read the book and say, you know, give me a thumbs up, thumbs down, what am I missing? Because I didn't want to get that wrong. It's such a big part of the book. I did not want to have that wrong. And I know I'll still probably get a review that says, you've got it all wrong. But, but at least I know I've done the research, and he's the one who gave me the nervous tick of like always constantly pulling on your hair or something like that, that is common with that. So I just kind of then, oh yeah, I can use that and throw that in for extra realism, and so.
So could I ask one thing? So
Yes.
It's part of it set in the Amazon. Is much of it when she's running in Brazil? And
This is actually the third book in a series. So the one before this is called The Diamond Diva Vendetta, and they're looking the Stafford investigations, who are my private eyes. They're looking for her at the beginning, and then they kind of get sidetracked with this other plot as you know. A woman is almost murdered right in front of the guys, and then so he gets kind of off on this other thing. But by the end, you know, all throughout it, they want to get back to finding Tiffany. That's why we're really here. And so at the end of that book, it's just kind of a little bit of, hey, we found Tiffany. And then this is where it starts, then, is where they actually find her. I didn't start at the beginning of the book from my excerpt, but the very beginning, they find her. And
it's in Brazil.
that's in Brazil, yes. So yeah, I did do a lot of research on Brazil for that book. And so, yeah, cool. Anything else?
How do you plot out your books?
Pardon that?
How do you plot your books?
How do I plot? Plot, he says. Who plots? No, I'm a very character-driven author, in that I have a general idea, I have a direction, I have an end in my head, and I start writing my characters, and they kind of tell me what the story is going to be. And often they'll change their mind in the middle, or I learn who that character was that I didn't know at the beginning. They've changed, they've switched on me, or they've shown me a layer I didn't know before, and then you can just kind of remold and make it work with your story. So, thanks a lot.
It reminds me of trying to plot my life. It's like, it's definitely character driven, isn't it? Oh, somebody asked my question. I love it when that happens. Because writing about a schizophrenic had to be crazy. I mean, it had to be really tricky to not let that overwhelm the narrative and confuse it. But anyway, admiration. So next, Scott Graham will read from his book, Canyonlands Carnage, a National Park Mystery. Scott is the author of the acclaimed National Park Mystery series and of 5 nonfiction books, including Extreme Kids, winner of the National Outdoor Book Award. He lives in Durango. Scott? Thank you.
I'm so honored to be here this evening with my fellow finalists. It's just such a thrill and a pleasure, and I'd like to thank the folks at Colorado Humanities as well as the good folks here at Book Bar. A better bookstore I don't know there's ever been invented than one that includes wine with your reading. It's really a pleasure to share this evening with Jodi and with Wendy and with the whole idea of mystery and historical fiction as well. It's just a lot of what I do with my National Park Mysteries delves into the history of the parks. And so to hear the two of you read has been a real pleasure tonight. And I'm also a Colorado State University alum, so you'll note that I'm a journalism alum as opposed to a creative writing alum. You'll probably notice that when you listen to my reading as compared to EJ's. My book, Canyonlands Carnage, is book number 7 in the National Park Mystery series with Torrey House Press. They're a small environmental publisher in Salt Lake City, and they're doing great stuff. And so if anyone is kind of curious about some of the really good environmental work, both literary fiction, literary nonfiction coming out of the environmental world, do check out Torrey House Press. And Craig Childs, who's going to be here in a while too from Torrey House Press. It's just wonderful stuff. I've been honored to do this series with Torrey House since kind of the start of Torrey House Press. I've kind of grown up together with them. And so the goal of each of these books is to give readers a sense of the place of the national park and also to share with readers either an environmental issue or a social justice issue that's really specific to that park. And the way that I do that is through an archaeologist whose name is Chuck Bender, his wife Janelle Ortega, and his stepdaughters, Janelle's daughters. Chuck is kind of learning to be a new father as the series plays out. In the case of Canyonlands Carnage, what we've got is a group of environmental water experts as well as water executives, the people who kind of have control of the waters of the Colorado River. And they have been tasked with taking an expedition down Cataract Canyon, which is the Colorado River, the whitewater, through the heart of Canyonlands National Park. And on this trip, they are supposed to be meeting and talking with one another about how best to use the waters, the dwindling waters of the Colorado River, both keep them for the environment as well as how best to use them for human use. So you've got these two groups that are somewhat antagonists, and what occurs is the book essentially turns into the classic Agatha Christie closed room mystery, where you've got these folks who've gone down into this deep canyon together. Bad things begin to happen on the expedition, and they look around the campfire and they realize, these bad things are happening and they're multiplying, and there can't be anyone but among us that may be creating what these bad things are happening. So what I'll read to you is a scene at the beginning of the book where one of the first of the bad things happens, and Chuck is rowing the gear barge, the big raft that is at the back of the expedition. So the rest of the expedition is just headed into the very first rapid at the top of Cataract Canyon. And Chuck is at the oars of this big, heavy raft, and his brother-in-law, Clarence Ortega, is along on the ride, and he's sitting on a cooler right in front of Chuck. As the speed of the current picked up, Chuck spun the raft until it was perpendicular to the flow of the river. Seated sideways to the seething hole waiting at the bottom of the tongue, he reached forward with his oars and dropped the blades into the water. He pulled backward, enlisting his shoulder and back muscles to apply more power to the stroke than he could with a forward push. His first pull on the oars would begin the process of powering the raft sideways across the tongue and away from the recirculating wave. If his attempt to break out of the tongue failed, he would have a few precious seconds to spin the raft forward and strike the hole's breaking wave head on. The key for all raft captains was to never enter a hole sideways, because the narrower side-to-side width of oval-shaped rafts meant entering in that position increased the odds of flipping exponentially. Chuck heaved backward on his oars, initiating his first stroke in the center of the rapid's entry tongue. The oar shafts bowed where they passed through the oarlocks at the sides of the raft, transferring the power of his stroke to the oar blades. The blades began their forward sweep through the water. He strained harder, applying every last bit of his strength to the stroke. In response, the oar shafts bowed another inch, and the right oarlock snapped in two. The freed oar straightened with a vibrating zing and skidded across the top of the raft's side thwart. The bronze oarlock's U-shaped top remained wrapped around the oar, while the bottom half of the oarlock poked from the head of the oar tower at Chuck's side, its sheared shaft glinting in the sun. Chuck stared at the spot where a second ago his oar had been secured to the oar tower. Oarlocks were made of soft metal, most commonly bronze, and thereby designed to break when the raft struck objects like rocks or cliffs. At the same time, however, oarlock shafts were fashioned to withstand many times more force than the strongest human could possibly apply to them with an oar stroke. Yet the gearboat's right oarlock had failed at Chuck's pole, leaving the boat, and Chuck and Clarence with it, at the mercy of the rapid. The raft sped down the center of the tongue, seconds from dropping into the hole. There wasn't enough time before the boat reached the recirculating wave for Chuck to replace the sheared oarlock. Instead, he had only the left oar at his disposal. He let go of the right oar, grabbed the left oar handle with both hands, and pulled, pivoting the raft until it faced downstream. 30 feet ahead, at the bottom of the entry tongue, the hole's backward cresting waves surged into the air, a seething wall of water 10 feet high. Next to Chuck, the unsecured right oar slid off the thwart. When the oar blade drove into the water, the force of the current against the blade pinwheeled the oar's heavy shaft above the river's surface. The shaft swung across the front of the boat like a pendulum, and the iron counterweight, bolted below the oar handle, struck the side of Clarence's helmet, a violent blow. "Clarence!" Chuck cried out, too late. Clarence collapsed across the cooler, his head cradled in his hands. The raft pivoted around the pinwheeling oar until the big boat once again floated sideways in the current. Chuck dug the left oar into the water and yanked the handle in desperation, but his effort was futile. The raft floated into the hole before he could reorient the boat downstream. The raft rode sideways up the face of the wave. It slowed to a crawl, then came to a full stop, hanging in space, nearly vertical. Clarence tumbled off the cooler. His big body slammed into a square metal storage box strapped to the side of the raft frame. Behind Clarence, Chuck toppled out of the captain's seat. The handle of the left oar, still secured in its oarlock, struck his ribcage, a bruising blow as he fell. He wrapped his arm around the left oar tower and clung to it as water poured over the thwarts, filling the boat from all sides. Still perpendicular to the current, the raft slid back down the face of the wave into the recirculating hole. Water sluiced over the bows, sweeping Clarence out of the boat. In a flash, he disappeared beneath the surface of the river. The madly churning water at the base of the wave suctioned the raft's lower thwart, trapping the boat in the hole, while the collapsing top of the wave shoved the upper thwart so far over that the boat's massive load of gear hung directly above Chuck's head. Before the raft flipped entirely, the water pouring over the side thwarts ripped Chuck's arms free of the oar tower and swept him out of the boat. He plunged into the swirling center of the hole and beneath the surface of the river. The water closed over his head, instantly reducing his world to bubbling quiet and murky darkness. There you go. Happy to answer any questions if anyone's got any. Mary Ann? That's right. No, he does resurface. Clarence is one of the fun recurring. And I have fun with him too. He's one of the recurring characters. Yep, he survives. Yes, ma'am.
I'm curious, when you research your books, do you go whitewater rafting in national parks and have a lot of fun exploring?
I absolutely do, and I do have a lot of fun. And I have learned before each book, they're kind of coming out one a year. I'll go to that park and spend a good amount of time with my wife, and we'll spend several days there, kind of checking out the places where the book is planning to be set, what I've got in mind. And it's amazing how much that can help, and just in terms of, Google Earth is amazing, the internet is amazing, but to be there right before I start each manuscript has been incredibly helpful. You get those smells, you get just the flavor of the place. Every book takes the reader into the backcountry somehow or another. Every book has a different, whether it's rock climbing in Yosemite or bears and wolves in Yellowstone, and that story I make it as real as I can by going there right before I start each of those stories. Any other questions? Yes. I've been, yes, yeah, that is absolutely a true experience. I've been fortunate to oar Cataract Canyon several times, and then to oar the Grand Canyon through on private trips through the Grand Canyon, Colorado River Rapids, 3 times. And that sort of description is exactly what you don't want to have happen. Going into one of those recirculating waves or holes sideways is the worst thing. And I've been in that position a couple of times. I haven't been swept out of a boat before. That's what's called being dump trucked. If you're dumped out and the boat ends up, going on without you. But I've absolutely been close a number of times. And so that's exactly what I'm trying to do with these books, is give that sense to people who maybe haven't gotten to experience some of those outdoor adventurous things, what it's like. So I hope that I've done with that. Yeah. All right. Thank you very much.
Scott, that was amazing. And I think describing water, I think painting water is very difficult. Photographing water can be tough. But writing it so that if you've been on a river trip, it felt so real. It gave me wonderful flashbacks to the salmon in 1980s. They were. I wasn't doing the oaring, so it was just wonderful. Thank you. All right, lastly, Wanda Venters will read from her book, Breakbone Fever, a Finnerty and Liccone Mystery that she co-wrote with Mary Rae, who could not be here tonight. Wanda moved to Colorado 35 years ago as a major stationed at Fitzsimmons Army Medical Center. After 3 decades as a pediatrician, she retired and began a second career, first as a children's author and then as a mystery novelist. Wanda lives in Aurora. Wanda?
Hello. I wanted to thank the Colorado Humanities and the Colorado Sun and Book Bar for hosting this event, and all of you for coming tonight. And it's great to meet my fellow finalists, so that's all fun. My book, Breakbone Fever, is about a murder mystery in Galveston, Texas. So there's a character who's not actually who's introduced in this reading, but hasn't really formulated in this reading, that is from Colorado. But it starts with an emergency room doctor called Louise Finnerty. And actually, Mary Rae and I went to medical school together, and then she said that she always thought Galveston, Texas would be a great place for a murder mystery. So we had a lot of fun researching that. We actually wrote this book, which is about a dengue fever, which is breakbone fever, and we actually wrote it before COVID existed. So the first part of this chapter introduces one of our protagonists, Louise Finnerty, and she's an emergency room physician. And she has started her day with trying to contact her friend Marnie, who lives in Colorado. That's the Colorado connection. Marnie has been in a grieving process for her husband, who died in a rafting accident. I told my husband when I wrote this that you die at the beginning of the book. Is that okay? So then Louise goes to her 12-hour shift in the ER, and we follow her through the first part of the ER. She's been busy throughout her shift with several patients, including the resuscitation of a young man who presented to the ER with dengue fever, which is otherwise known as breakbone fever. So we're going to pick up this first chapter at the end of Louise's shift. And again, this is Galveston, Texas, September 26, 2018. As the sun came up, Louise felt the exhaustion that came from shift work. She finished her notes, hoping Didier, her husband, was managing the front home okay. Wouldn't it be nice to just kiss the kids as they went off to school and then collapse into bed? To make sure she had not left any details unattended, she glanced at the screen on her computer, which listed all the ER patients. Dread filled her heart as she recognized a name: Jennifer Drake, 49, critical care room number 6. DOA. No, it can't be. Not Jennifer. No way was her friend the person listed as dead on arrival in room 6. Louise rushed to the room and almost collapsed when she recognized the body. Seeing Louise, Dr. Jane Torson crossed the room. As she started to decompress by telling Louise about the resuscitation, she saw Louise's distress. "Oh my God, did you know her?" asked Jane. Louise sank into a chair. "Yes, she was a very good friend, but please, go ahead and tell me what happened." Jane said, "She was found on the East Beach by some early morning beachcombers. Their dog was checking out what looked like a pile of towels, but as they got closer, they could tell it was a body. The woman started CPR while her husband dialed 911. Jane went on, and Louise followed the story, able to fill in the blanks herself. EMTs arrived and took over. They intubated and started bagging her. They placed her on the thumper to administer chest compressions. The heart monitor showed no activity. Unable to start an IV, they squirted epinephrine into the tube in her throat and drove her the 5-minute run to the hospital. Her core temperature upon arrival was 92 degrees. They gradually warmed her to avoid sending her heart into chaotic and deadly rhythm, but even after her body reached normal temperature and after a prolonged resuscitation attempt, there was still no heartbeat. They pronounced her DOA. As Jane concluded her tale, she looked at Louise. "Are you going to be okay?" Louise nodded silently as tears streamed down her face. Jane left to complete paperwork after giving Louise a hug. People came in and out of the room, and it took a minute for Louise to notice the presence of the Detective Sudan, who was married to Bob, the evening charge nurse. The detective was a compact, middle-aged woman. Her quick movements suggested agility and strength. Her smooth, light brown skin made guessing her age difficult. Louise had always respected Ileana's calm, businesslike demeanor. With her warm brown eyes, the detective imparted empathy to the victims of crime who frequented the ER. Over the years, their professional interactions led to friendship. The detective gave Louise a moment to compose herself. "Hi, Louise. So sorry for your loss. I remember meeting Dr. Drake at some of your get-togethers. I know she was a good friend of yours. If you can stand it, I would like to ask you some preliminary questions." Louise nodded. "We found her phone in her pants pocket. It had her license and a credit card in the case, so we were able to make a preliminary identification. I hate to put you on the spot right now, but can you confirm that this is the body of Jennifer Drake?" No question. She's even wearing the earrings I gave her for her last birthday. Opals were her birthstone." "Do you know if Dr. Drake had any family here?" Louise shook her head. "No, she grew up in Iowa." "Significant other?" Hunched over now from physical and emotional exhaustion, Louise whispered, "She's been seeing Garrett Mancinelli, the owner of Garrett's Seawall Trattoria." "Was she depressed?" "God, no. She worked a lot, but she was in the process of adopting another cat. People don't do that if they plan to commit suicide." Ileana paused before continuing softly. "We don't know if it was suicide, an accident, or foul play. At this point, we have a person found dead on the beach. I'll let you know what we find out about from the medical examiner. Here, give me a hug. Are you going to be okay? Should I call DDA? No, I'm okay. He's with the kids, and I've got my car here. I'm off as soon as I write my last note." With Ileana's departure, Louise was all alone in the room with Jen's lifeless body. She walked over to Jen and lovingly took her hand. Jen still wore her favorite blush polish. Not wanting to leave her, Louise stood for a long time by her bedside, tears streaming down her face. Oh, Jen. When a transporter arrived to take Jen to the morgue, Louise relinquished Jen's hand and reluctantly said goodbye. So that starts a murder mystery with the murder. And the book goes on to Marnie comes down from Colorado, and they start investigating, what really happened to their friend. And that gets involved with dengue fever, and the person who died worked at what is really the Galveston National Laboratory, which is one of the 4 or 5 laboratories that study all kinds of infectious diseases. So the fun part of the research for that was that we actually got a tour of it. So we got to go in there with the mosquitoes, which were, they told us, not infected. Any questions? No, we were both from, she's actually from New York, but we went to medical school together in Oklahoma, where I grew up. And but she's lived most of her professional life in Texas, and she was living in Houston. And so she would go down, the last 10 years she was in Houston, and she would go down and visit Galveston. And it's kind of a really special little town. It has a lot of history, which is in the book. And most people who've read the book have said that they really want to visit Galveston because it's kind of it's very unique.
You could start by answering what is another person.
Well, I am a ghostwriter, so I'm used to working, collaborating with people, come up with ideas. So I've written memoirs. One of my favorite ones was a woman who was at 15 years old. She was a single mom in Jamaica, and she was kicked out of her house, and her dad took her child. And so, I had to kind of work with her and channel that story. And then she ended up coming to the U.S. And then today she is the head nurse at one of the largest hospices in Georgia. So it's a very interesting career that she had. So that's what do I know about being a single mom living in the beach of Jamaica, right? So, but I had to work with her in that regard. And then I've worked with some other business people who are very, very successful in their field, and then other people come up with ideas for novels. Usually they come up with the idea, and I have to fill them out, and how it just depends on every client. Some clients are like, okay, Mario, here's the general idea, you go for it, and then they give me feedback, and other people are very hands-on. And they tell me, hey, you've gone off the rails. You got to come back this way, and that. So I'm a writer, so a ghostwriter. So I have a very thick skin. So that's the interesting thing about being a writer is that you have to be very sensitive, right? I mean, you have to be able to pick up on things. I have to get antennas out, but at the same time, you have to have some armor because people say terrible things to you, and you just have to kind of let it go off on that. But it's been I think I've probably done maybe 22 books. Working with other people, and then my own on top of that. I've published, I think, 8 novels under my name. I have 2 over there if you want to get them. I have a children's book, University of Doom, and one of my vampire novels is over there too. So, all right. Anybody else have? Yes, sir.
As a ghost author, is this the first book you published with your name on it?
No. What happens sometimes? My clients, when we write the contract, all the work is theirs. Okay, everything. Like this book is copyrighted under Tomas Alamilla, but sometimes they like what I've done so much they want my name on the cover as well, and I'm honored that that's happened. But somehow they may have the misconception about putting my name on the cover will help sales. It doesn't really, maybe not. But I'm honored when they ask me, hey, would you mind having your book on the cover? And one of the challenges is that even though I'm ghostwriting, I have to embrace the project as if it's my own. Okay, I don't want to cut any corners and do as it is if it was my baby. So, all right. I love your story too. I have a water thing in here.
Have you?
Yeah, but where do you share, right? Okay. Anybody have anything else? Any other questions? I'll be happy to moderate. Excuse me. Yeah, happy to moderate. Keep hitting this thing. If you had one hanging from the ceiling, everybody bumping their heads on it all the time. So I guess it doesn't matter. Anybody have any other questions? I can ask questions from the other authors here if you like.
Tell us where you found Tomas. I'm curious to hear where Tomas.
Oh, he came to us. I mean, when I say us, I mean Mark Graham Communications. If you go online, he's the one that does it, and he's probably got 20 writers working for him. If you know Cynthia Swanson, right now I'm in an anthology called Denver Noir, and Cynthia is works
Just
for
coming
him.
out, a bunch of really good Colorado
Right.
authors.
Yes. And if you guys know Mark Stevens, okay, he's also one of the authors that works under Mark Graham Communication. So Tomas came to Mark Graham, and Mark Graham said, "Hey, Mario's a good fit." So we work together in that regard. I just kind of sad to share it, but the reason Tomas is not here is because he works in Mexico, goes back and forth, and if people find out that you're doing things in Mexico, they'll kidnap your family members. And so he's got to keep things quiet and doesn't have his photograph out there in that regard. Yes?
For those of us who are striving to find the right way to publish our own books, what is the best way to find the necessary help from people, like editors and agents and stuff like that if we're going the commercial route?
I'm the president of the Colorado Authors League, but we mostly deal with published authors. The Colorado Independent Publishers Association, they have lists on their website of, they just let people join so that they can basically put their stuff out there for you, You need an editor, you need a publisher, you need a book cover. There are people that you can look at on the CIPA
Yeah. Okay.
website.
Thank you.
Two other resources are Lighthouse Writers Workshops.
Okay.
Okay, and they're having Lit Fest in June, so you can try that. And the other one is the the Rocky Mountain Fiction Writers, if you're writing commercial fiction, novels. And they're also really good resources.
So sorry, I don't mean to take everybody's
No, that's
time.
fine. And I can talk to you afterwards.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Anybody else have a question? Yes, sir.
So how do you decide which genre you're going to focus on?
Okay.
For the authors?
Is this for any of us? I just always have loved mysteries. And I, to be honest, I loved the safety of the framework that a mystery gives you. I felt like, as I was saying to EJ, I've been a journalist and then had the opportunity to try my hand at fiction, and it felt like there was a safety net there because you've got this wonderful structure, and then you can just kind of go wherever you want from that structure. So for me, it was a feeling of being able to take what I'd always loved and then kind of take it to the parts that I'd always loved, and then have fun with these mysteries, and also kind of ride a little bit on the coattails of Nevada Bar, who had done this wonderful series of national park mysteries as well, and take that idea with an archaeologist and go with it. So it's just kind of what that whole classic thing of writing what I know, and then also writing what I like to read.
What do you write mystery?
Well, I think because I love mysteries and I've read them and I've read Nevada Bar. I mean, I just have read so many series, and so it was a familiar framework for me. And it seemed really doable, especially starting out.
And apropos of starting out, I made the terrible mistake of thinking there was a novel I'd started and was eager to write, and I thought, I don't know how to write a novel. Oh, this idea appeals to me, and if it's a historical novel, then I have the roadmap. It'll be easier. I had no idea. So then how much research it would involve to take off my kind of 21st century, 20th century mindset and enter, a world 200 years ago. Also though, it was love of terrific writers. I really recommend the novels of Ellis Avery. If you've not read her, I highly recommend her. And reading her, The Last Nude, about the painter Tamara de Lempicka, really made me want to try my hand at this. So I thought it would be easier, like paint by numbers.
Any other?
Well, I've written in a number of different genres, and just for me, it's a matter of, okay, I've done this, I'm bored with it, let me try another one. I would never be one of those, 30 Highland romance, that they just keep going and going in the same genre. Be like, okay, no. But I just you get a spark of an idea, and it's like, I went up Pikes Peak in a lightning storm, and they made us sit at the top while, we couldn't get off because the lightning was going, and I had to go to the bathroom, okay? Because they make you drink all that water on the way up so you don't have altitude sickness, and so they're making you sit there and wait. It's like, this is the first scene in my time travel series, I got to thinking about lightning on Pikes Peak, and there's this historical ranch kind of right close to Pikes Peak. And so those kind of things just started percolating in my head. And I was like, well, what if you got struck by lightning and it sent you back in time, you know? And so there it was. She, modern woman, goes back to 1892. My hook for that one is a 21st century woman shakes up a doctor's 19th century world. And so it's just, you get a little spark and you say, that's obviously, well, maybe it could have been a mystery, but for me it was obviously time travel fun. You could do that kind of a book, and I've read quite a few time travel novels, and so that was fun. I took that for 3 books, and then I was like, you know what? I'm done with time travel. I don't think I want to do another time travel book. So I had a character in one of my other series who was an author who wrote comic sci-fi romances. And I had given her titles of Mars Madness and Beware the Eyes of Mars. And I just thought, well, heck, wouldn't it be fun if I wrote her books? And so I just kind of had those titles, and what can I do with that? And so, yeah, I've got a 3-book series then of that. So it's just, for me, it's just fun. It's just play, man. You get to go, and this is my sugar daddy. He lets me do, he pays the bills so I can do what I love. Hooray, Kevin, I love you.
Can you adopt us?
Really support one.
Anybody have any other questions? So I have a question for you guys. Do you guys believe in writer's block? No.
Well, yeah. I mean, you have times where you're like, heck, I don't know what's going on here, or I don't know what to do at this point. But there are often, for me, I just go do something else for a while, and then just come back to it, and it comes to you eventually.
You?
Yeah, I guess I've been writing enough to get totally blocked, but I do find that's one reason working with another person helps, is that they kind of can push you down the road.
My counter to that is, if would we believe anybody who has like mechanic's block, and you go to take your car to a mechanic, he's like, sorry, I can't work on your car today. Or a surgeon, sorry, you come back tomorrow, maybe I won't have surgeon's block tomorrow. No, you used to sit down and get it done. I don't know, are we at the end of time? I guess so.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you all very much.
Close this out with a few thank yous. Thank you for the book bar. Thank you to Colorado Book Awards entrance selectors and judges and volunteers, and some of them are secretly here tonight. Thanks to the Colorado Humanities and Center for the Book staff for finalist readings down, right? Three finalist readings down, 5 to go, or something like that. Is that right? We're close. But the exciting thing is this is a super COVID deal. Colorado Book Awards is going to be at the Denver Center for the Performing Arts, Ellie Calkins Opera House, with catering by Kevin Taylor. I know, it'll never happen again. You really must come. It's a wonderful room. I've always wanted to be there. We never get this. We're always bargain shopping. So I encourage you, only $30, gets you a reception, gets you the program, and I think we've negotiated a drink ticket with that. So we'll do the party first with the finalists. We'll do finalist toast. We'll do the big finalist picture. We'll celebrate. We'll give the winners a little bit of time to read, less than you got tonight, and then we'll have dessert to celebrate the winners. So that's our day. We'll start at 4:30 on June 25th, which is a Saturday, which should make parking easier. And thank you for coming out to celebrate Colorado authors, and we look forward to seeing you at all of the readings coming up, Fridays in May. Thanks.